And now the Deeper Thinking Podcast, a daily exploration into how philosophy, psychology, and technology shape how we think, feel, and live.
Welcome to the Deeper Thinking Podcast. This episode engages directly with an idea published by Michael Schrage and David Chiron in MIT Sloan Management Review, where they argue that the success or failure of artificial intelligence initiatives hinges less on technical execution and more on philosophical clarity. Their piece, Philosophy Eats AI, reframes artificial intelligence not simply as a tool to be implemented, but as a system of thought to be understood. Drawing on frameworks of teleology, purpose, epistemology, how systems create knowledge, and ontology, what they define as real, Schrage and Chiron show that AI performance improves when those philosophical foundations are coherent, and falters when they're conflicted. Their examples are timely and sharp. Google's Gemini struggles with conflicting objectives. Starbucks and Amazon succeed by aligning their AI models with clearly articulated values. The takeaway? Philosophy isn't abstract, it's operational. It informs what your AI is optimizing for, how it makes decisions, and what outcomes it considers valid. This is the kind of insight that resonates with executive leaders navigating AI's promise, peril, and unpredictability. In this episode, I aim to build on their thesis, not by questioning it, but by extending its implications into the executive domain. If we accept that philosophy underwrites AI systems, then the strategic question becomes, what kind of philosophical thinker is your organization becoming? This is not just about systems alignment or digital maturity. It's about judgment, accountability, and the epistemic infrastructure of leadership in a machine-augmented world. My goal is to unpack how these philosophical dynamics quietly shape AI deployments across industries, and how forward-looking leaders can leverage this awareness to avoid failure, enhance clarity, and reclaim human meaning in algorithmic environments. Because in today's business landscape, understanding your AI isn't just about model performance, it's about worldview fluency. And that begins, as Schrage and Chiron argue, with asking better questions. The phrase philosophy eats AI isn't just metaphor, it's structure. As Michael Schrage and David Chiron argue, organizations obsessed with AI's technical execution often overlook the deeper question: what assumptions, values, and logics are their systems built upon? But if AI is now being fed by philosophy, the reverse is also true. Philosophy is being metabolized by machines. Every optimization model, neural network, and generative prompt doesn't just reflect purpose, knowledge, and reality, it performs them. And as AI systems scale, what we're witnessing is not the automation of thought, but the automation of worldview. This is not a crisis, it's a clarity test. Because what AI reveals, often more starkly than human judgment ever could, is what an organization truly believes. A churn model that penalizes community engagement, a recommendation engine that rewards outrage. These aren't technical glitches, they're ontological commitments. AI operationalizes what's already implicit at speed and at scale. That's why the language of teleology, epistemology, and ontology isn't academic overhead. It's boardroom infrastructure. Leaders are no longer just stewards of strategy, they're curators of institutional reality. But there's a deeper inversion unfolding. AI doesn't just reflect human philosophies, it's beginning to generate them. Recommendation systems are becoming value systems. Predictive models are shaping not just what we choose, but how we decide. If we treat AI as passive tool, we will miss its performative role as philosophical agent. And in doing so, we risk building systems that not only fail to align with our purpose, but start subtly redefining it. So the real question is not whether philosophy eats AI, it's whether leaders are willing to audit the philosophical diets of their systems and of themselves. Because in a world of synthetic cognition, the most dangerous assumption is not that AI might get it wrong, it's that we already know what right looks like. Judgment used to be the mark of leadership. Today, it's at risk of becoming a user interface setting. As artificial intelligence moves from decision support to decision substitution, many leaders are discovering that the systems they've greenlit are not merely speeding up operations, they're silently reshaping what decision-making even means. At first, this looks like efficiency. Faster processing, fewer bottlenecks, data-driven confidence. But what begins as delegation quickly turns to displacement. Leaders stop asking if a system's outputs are right and start assuming they must be because they came from the system. Interpretive friction gives way to operational fluency. The AI becomes not just advisor, but arbiter. This transformation is epistemic before it is technological. Organizations are absorbing new ways of knowing without fully registering the cost, a slow erosion of interpretive muscle. Where humans once debated, reframed, or contextualized, the model now delivers a single, statistically backed answer. This answer is rarely neutral. It's shaped by training data, weighted parameters, encoded priorities, all of which carry implicit views about what matters. When those views go unexamined, they harden into invisible orthodoxy. The system begins to perform judgment, not merely assist it. Here's where synthetic judgment becomes essential, not as a buzzword, but as a cognitive and organizational necessity. Synthetic judgment is the practice of retaining philosophical discretion in environments increasingly defined by machine logic. It's not about distrusting AI, it's about being able to ask, what kind of reasoning is this system performing on my behalf? What has it privileged, excluded, assumed, or ignored? And more urgently, when does speed obscure context? When does precision undermine perspective? Leadership in this landscape is no longer about knowing the answer. It's about knowing what kind of answer your system is designed to deliver and what kind of questions it's structurally incapable of asking. Because the greatest risk is not that your AI makes a mistake, it's that it makes sense in ways your organization no longer knows how to challenge. Ontology is not a word that often appears in strategic planning documents, but it should be. In the context of artificial intelligence, ontology refers to the structuring of reality, what entities the system recognizes, which categories it operates within, and what distinctions it draws or erases. These design decisions are rarely named as such. They're built into the data model, baked into the interface, normalized in outputs. But they're consequential because what a system can't see, it can't serve, and what it can't define, it will distort. This matters in domains far beyond tech. When a healthcare AI treats a patient as a cluster of risk vectors rather than as a relational whole, it doesn't just change the diagnosis, it reshapes what care means. When a financial model sees people only through their transaction histories, it doesn't just optimize offers, it abstracts identities. Ontological design becomes strategic design, and failure to interrogate it leads to decisions that may be efficient but are no longer intelligible to the people they affect. Organizations with high ontological clarity ask, what world does our AI presume into existence? Are we making our customers visible as people or just as behavioral profiles? Are we encoding cultural nuance or flattening it? Are we surfacing marginal conditions or erasing them through aggregation? These are not soft questions. They are structural ones because systems that can't see difference can't act responsibly, and systems that can't register context can't generate trust. This is why philosophical audit is not a compliance task. It's a design discipline. It's the difference between AI that delivers alignment and AI that delivers alienation. Ontology in this light isn't just about what is, it's about what's allowed to be seen. And in a world where AI systems increasingly define the contours of perception, leadership means choosing that map with care, not just because it's ethical, but because it's the only path to intelligence that's actually useful. If ontology governs what a system sees, epistemology governs how it claims to know. Every AI model, whether predictive or generative, is an epistemic machine. It makes knowledge claims based on rules for pattern detection, statistical inference, and algorithmic generalization. These claims are then taken up by leaders and systems as facts, forecasts, or recommendations, but they are not neutral. They are shaped by underlying assumptions about what knowledge is valid, which evidence counts, and how certainty is calculated. When executives adopt AI without interrogating these assumptions, they risk confusing information with insight and output with understanding. This confusion can be subtle. A fraud detection system might flag a transaction based on historical data, but historical for whom? A hiring model might prioritize traits that correlate with past success, but success by whose definition? In these moments, the epistemology of the system is not just a technical feature, it's a worldview. It governs how the organization thinks. And if that worldview is narrow, opaque, or misaligned with the company's mission, the entire system becomes a liability masquerading as logic. Philosophical fluency at the epistemological level means being able to ask, what kind of knowledge does this system produce? Is it probabilistic, contextual, relational, reductionist? Does it amplify ambiguity or suppress it? And more importantly, how does this epistemic frame support or subvert our institutional goals? Because it's not enough for AI to be accurate. It has to be meaningful. It has to support decisions that don't just make sense to the machine, but to the people who bear their consequences. This is where synthetic judgment earns its keep. It's the practice of holding two truths at once, that AI systems can surface insights humans might miss, and that those insights are shaped by logics that may not match the complexity of the real world. The job of the leader is not to override every model. It's to interpret its outputs in light of its epistemic origins and to know when not to defer. Because in a landscape where AI increasingly tells us what's true, the competitive advantage lies not in having the best data, but in knowing what that data knows and what it can never know alone. Teleology, AI's implicit sense of purpose, is often the most overlooked and most determinative dimension. Every model is trained to optimize something, but what it optimizes and why is rarely subject to the same scrutiny as its architecture or accuracy. That's a problem, because teleological drift, where a system's objective silently shifts away from strategic intent, doesn't show up in validation curves or performance dashboards. It shows up when a personalization engine makes customers feel surveilled, or when a churn model retains the wrong kind of loyalty. These failures aren't technical. They're philosophical. They reveal a gap between what the system is doing and what the organization actually values. This gap often emerges from a lack of teleological clarity at the design stage. Teams focus on what's measurable, not what's meaningful. They select KPIs that are legible to the model, but alien to the business's mission. They outsource decisions to systems that do exactly what they were asked to, just not what anyone truly intended. Shraj and Kieron are precise on this point. Purpose must precede implementation. Otherwise, AI becomes a mirror of incoherence. And no amount of post hoc ethical review can reverse engineer integrity into a system that was misaligned from the start. Philosophical literacy at the teleological level means asking, what is this system really for? Not in the abstract, but in operational terms. What future is it trying to bring about? What behaviors is it rewarding, and what trade-offs is it making invisible? Leaders who engage these questions proactively design systems that don't just perform, but perform in alignment with institutional aims. They recognize that a well-tuned model trained on the wrong objectives is not a breakthrough, it's a ticking clock. Teleology, then, is not a constraint, it's a compass. When organizations define purpose clearly and early, they give their AI systems something rare, the possibility of coherence. And in an age where speed is cheap but clarity is rare, coherence may be the most valuable output of all. In the fusion of these three dimensions, ontology, epistemology, and teleology, that synthetic judgment becomes not just valuable but necessary. In practice, this isn't a philosophical luxury, it's a leadership skill. Synthetic judgment is what allows executives to interpret, not just implement, to ask whether a system's outputs reflect organizational truth or merely algorithmic coherence. It's the capacity to intervene at the level of meaning before things break at the level of metrics. And as AI systems become more powerful, more opaque, and more embedded in decision-making flows, this interpretive capacity becomes non-negotiable. It starts not with new technology, but with new habits of inquiry. Leaders must learn to ask foundational questions before design, during deployment, and after impact. What worldview does this system encode? What assumptions are driving our model's sense of truth? Are we optimizing for something we still believe in? These questions don't delay innovation. They discipline it. They ensure that scale doesn't come at the cost of meaning and that velocity doesn't outpace values. Organizations serious about synthetic judgment will embed it structurally. They'll create decision frameworks that include philosophical checkpoints. They'll bring cross-disciplinary expertise into model governance, not just engineers and compliance officers, but sociologists, ethicists, and domain storytellers. They'll treat AI outputs not as endpoints, but as starting points for interpretation. Most importantly, they'll invest in cognitive diversity, not as a human resources issue, but as an epistemic one. Because the more complex the system, the more likely it is to miss what only a multiplicity of perspectives can surface. In this sense, synthetic judgment is less about managing machines than about managing meaning. It's not a rejection of AI, but a refusal to be intellectually outsourced by it. It's what allows leaders to stay proximate to purpose, even when the systems around them are changing faster than the language used to describe them. And in that gap between output and understanding is where modern leadership now lives. The deeper insight, and perhaps the most urgent, is that AI does not merely reflect our institutions, it reorganizes them. Once embedded, it doesn't just speed up processes or automate decisions. It begins to shape what is visible, what is valued, and what is considered valid. This is not a hypothetical risk. It's already happening. The ontology of the system becomes the architecture of the organization. The epistemology of the model becomes the framework for reasoning. The teleology of the algorithm becomes the direction of the strategy. Slowly, imperceptibly, the machine's logic becomes the institution's logic. What this reveals is something simple but profound. Governance is now epistemological. Leadership is ontological. Strategy is teleological. The boundaries between philosophy and operations have collapsed, not in theory, but in infrastructure. And for organizations that fail to recognize this collapse, the danger is not just misalignment, it's misrecognition. They will think they are making decisions when they are merely ratifying outputs. They will think they are innovating when they are simply repeating what the system has learned to optimize. In short, they will mistake automation for progress. But there is an alternative. Leaders who cultivate philosophical fluency, not as an abstract discipline, but as a practical lens, gain a different kind of power. They can see not just what their systems are doing, but what their systems are thinking. They can trace misalignment not just to code, but to concept. They can build technologies that are not only functional, but reflective of the institution's best self. This is why philosophy eats AI, and why that metaphor is only the beginning. AI has become our infrastructure for decision-making. That means the questions that once lived in journals and seminars now live in models and interfaces. And it means the organizations that succeed won't be the ones that move fastest, but the ones that think deepest. Because in the end, intelligence, human or artificial, is only as useful as the philosophy that guides it. Philosophy didn't just eat AI, it wrote its code, and it's hungry for meaning. What Schrag and Chiron have articulated is not a provocation, but a shift in strategic grammar. From deploying systems to decoding them, from technical fluency to conceptual alignment. Their contribution reframes AI not as a tool to be used, but as a worldview to be understood. The task ahead isn't merely about managing risk or increasing capability, it's about restoring interpretive depth in a landscape increasingly defined by machine-generated shallows. This is where the future of leadership lies, not in mastering every model, but in cultivating a kind of epistemic self-awareness. Leaders must now learn to think across layers of logic and meaning, system and self. They must recognize when their tools are encoding unintended assumptions and when outputs reflect inherited contradictions. And they must develop a discipline of questioning that is rigorous enough to confront abstraction, but grounded enough to steer action. The organizations best prepared for this future will not be those with the most sophisticated tech stack or the fastest models. They will be those with the clearest internal philosophies, those who know what they believe, why they believe it, and how to ensure their systems reflect that belief with integrity. They will audit not only for accuracy, but for meaning. They will measure not only performance, but coherence. They will design not just for outcomes, but for worldviews. In this moment, philosophy is not ancillary to AI. It is its grammar, its compass, its constraint. And in the hands of the right leadership, it is also its greatest asset. Because the most strategic question an executive can now ask of any AI system is not, what can it do? But what kind of knowing does it represent, and is it the kind of knowing we want to lead with? The future belongs to those who can answer that, not just fluently, but wisely. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Deeper Thinking podcast. This episode was digitally narrated by Holly, who helps bring our ideas to life. Thank you for your positive reviews on Apple Podcasts. They help us reach more people like you.